Okay. Welcome, Chiamaka. I'm happy to find you in class. While you are here, we will not wait for the others. Okay, so I want you to confirm to me on the chat that you can hear me and you can see me. I want you to go to the chat and confirm that. If you can confirm that, then we are good. So I don't know if you can see me. Chiamaka, can you see me? You can see me, go to the chat room and chat that and you can hear my voice. I want to assume that you can see me and my voice. But if you can to the chat room, be happy. Still waiting for you. That's what is waiting. That's okay. So can you see me now? If you can see me, I want you to go to the chat room and say you can see me. The non-response is as a result of not hearing me. I want to be sure that you can hear me. Okay, somebody say she can see me. That also means that she can hear me. Thank you so much. Okay, so now our topic for today is absorption costing versus activity-based costing. Like you saw in the invite I sent to you, the message I sent first time, the topic is the overview of cost, assumption costing, and activity-based costing. What is assumption costing? What is activity-based costing? These are the two things we will work on tonight, and we will do a good job on that. Now, costs can be classified into two according Okay, so sorry for the break in transmission. So sorry. Okay, so I've shared my screen again. Okay, so cost can be classified into two according to their behaviors. And so we have the variable costs and the fixed costs. So how does a variable cost behave? How does the fixed cost behave? Now, variable costs are those costs that change with varying levels of activities. It means that when the level of activity changes its volume, the variable cost will change its magnitude. Examples include direct material, direct labor, and direct expenses. Now, these are direct costs we find in traceable to the products that we are producing. So direct costs are sometimes called avoidable costs. And so variable costs, which is found in direct costs, are also called avoidable costs because we can avoid spending money on variable costs. If we want to avoid spending a higher variable cost, it means we will not produce high volume of activity. If we want to spend nothing on variable costs, then we'll produce nothing. So the more you produce, the more variable costs you incur. The less you produce, the less you incur, so you can avoid variable costs. Now, another name given to direct costs is called the prime cost. So you must have heard about prime costs. So prime cost is those direct materials, direct expenses, direct labor. All of them are called together prime cost. So mathematically now we can say that our variable costs equal to our direct costs. And variable costs we'll say is equal to direct material costs, direct labor costs, direct expenses costs, or we can say direct expenses. We can also say that variable costs equal prime costs. We can also say that variable costs equal avoidable costs. So these are some of the behaviors exhibited by variable costs. They are direct costs, they are prime costs, they are avoidable costs. Now our attention is now shifted to the fixed costs. How does the fixed cost behave? Now the fixed costs behave differently from that of variable costs in the sense that fixed costs remain unchanged despite your varying level of activities. It means that it doesn't matter how much you produce, your fixed cost remains unchanged. Now let's take, for example, you are producing bread in your bakery. When we talked about variable costs, we said the direct material cost, which is a flour, will increase if you are producing more bread in your bakery. If you are producing less bread, the materials you will use will be smaller. But look at fixed cost now. It doesn't matter how many units of bread you are going to be producing. You are going to be paying the same amount in rent, factory rent. So it means that if you are paying 1 million naira as your factory rent, whether you produce nothing, that fixed cost would have been incurred. And so you see that fixed cost remains unchanged, irrespective of your level of activity. And so we call fixed cost unavoidable costs. Why are they called unavoidable costs? Because whether you are producing or not, you must incur those costs. Look at rent, for example. Whether you produce in the factory or not, you must pay the factory rent. And so it is unavoidable. Now, mathematically, we can say fixed costs are indirect costs. Look at rent, for example. You cannot see the rent of your factory in the bread that you produce. But of course, we know that the rent for the factory is factored in to the cost of the bread, but it is not a direct cost because you cannot trace rent in your bread. Unlike materials that you can trace the flour to the bread, which is direct costs, fixed costs are indirect costs. They are indirectly factored into the cost of the product. Another name for those indirect costs is called overheads. Overheads are indirect costs. We also can call them period costs because normally when we are looking at overheads or indirect costs, they are incurred over a period of time. And so what have we said about fixed costs? The behavior of fixed costs is as follows. They are indirect costs, meaning that they cannot be traced directly to the product. They are overheads and they are unavoidable costs. So this is how we know fixed cost behavior mathematically. Now, in the production process, it is possible that we can incur both variable costs and fixed costs at the same time. For example, let's go back to our bread that we are making in our factory. We must use materials. The factory must buy material to make the bread. That is variable costs. They must engage laborers, frontline laborers to do the job. Now, that is also a variable cost. They can also pay rent. They will also account for depreciation. These are fixed costs. So in order to know the total cost of a product, there is a need for you to identify the variable cost elements existing there and the fixed cost elements that you can identify. And so when you are looking for your total costs, you do not just say, okay, let me just take the variable cost. Do not say, okay, let me take only the fixed cost. You must integrate the variable cost and the fixed cost together. So we say mathematically that your total cost is equal to your variable cost plus your fixed cost. Okay? Now, another name we give the total cost is full cost. So when you are measuring your costs, you want to get the full cost, you must look for the variable cost element and the fixed cost element and add them together, you get your full cost. So we see that full cost is divided into variable cost and fixed cost. Another name for full cost is total cost. Now that we've known the behavior of costs, which we say is variable cost and fixed cost, and we have seen what is called total cost or full cost, there are two methods or ways that we can account for the full cost of a product. There are two ways we can account for it. One of them is the absorption costing method. I call it the AC method. The second one is the activity-based costing method. I call it the ABC method. Now, our discussion tonight will be centered on these two methods, and we can see, we'll be able to look at what are the differences between these two methods. What are the similarities existing in these two methods, and which one of them is most reliable? Which one of them is used most frequently in practice? Let's take them one after the other. First, we take the absorption costing method. Now, when we say absorption, what do we mean? Now let's look at the meaning of the word absorb. Okay, what comes to your mind when you hear the word absorb? What comes to my mind is a foam or a sponge. When there is water on the ground and you want to clean up the water, you can either use a foam or a mop. And what happens when you put the foam on the water and press, the foam absorb the water. And so that is absorb. Absorb here means taking in. You are taking it into yourself. So the foam takes the water into itself. It is absorbing it. Okay, now look at when we put food on in the fire. We look at rice. You want to cook rice. You put rice in the fire. Before you know it, the rice will rise. Why is it rising? Because it is absorbing the water in it. And so that is absorbing. Now, when we say absorption costing method, it means that we are looking at a method whereby the cost is being taken in by the product. It means the full cost of a product is being taken in by the product like a sponge or like a foam. The product is taking all the costs like a foam into itself. And when we say full cost here, we mean the variable cost and the fixed cost. So we're looking at absorption costing method as a way of product taking in all the costs within itself. Another way of calling it, another way of saying it is that the costs are being charged to the product. A way of charging or apportioning all the costs into the product. Now, there are two methods we said. One of them is absorption costing. It's also called the traditional method. Why is it being called the traditional method? It's because this has been in use before the activity-based costing. So the activity-based costing is called a modern costing method. So the traditional method versus the modern method. Now we're looking at the traditional method. In absorption costing, all the direct costs which are traceable to the final product, there is no problem in absorbing or allocating or apportioning them to the final product. Remember, we said direct costs are traceable to the product. Direct costs are variable costs. There is no problem in apportioning all the variable costs to the product. Do you know why? Because we said they are traceable. So you see here that you want to look at material cost, the flour, you can trace the flour to the product. And so there is no problem in allocating the flour, cost of flour to the bread we are producing. So if you look at the chart here in diagram 1.1, the direct allocation of variable costs using absorption cost here, we see all the variable costs, which are flour, butter, egg, all these things used in making bread. You can throw them into the directly into the product. You can trace them there, and so you can apportion them there. It is called direct allocation of costs. So you see there that direct material, direct labor are directly allocated to the final product. So when it comes to variable cost, there is no problem. Now here comes the fun part. When we want to deal with fixed costs or indirect costs or overhead. things get a little bit complicated. And that is where the methods absorption costing takes effect. So the absorption costing is trying to explain how you sponge in the fixed cost, how you take in the fixed cost. Why is it a problem? Unlike variable cost, you can trace variable cost to the product. Fixed cost cannot be traced to the product. So now, how do you now take in a cost that is not directly linked to a product? How do you now charge it to a product? How do you allocate it into a product? And that is what absorption costing is trying to explain. If you look at diagram 1.2, you find out that there is a halfway house blocking the fixed cost to the final product. It means that before you will channel all the fixed costs, which is like rent and depreciation, before you channel them to the final product, they must pass through a toll gate. They must pass through a small room, a waiting room where they are processed. Now that waiting room is called, what name will I call it now? I would say that waiting room, that halfway medium house is usually seen as a noun. A noun. A noun is a name of a person, place, or thing. And so you can see there that in that halfway house there, we see a manager. A manager is a person. And so the rent or the cost that are fixed costs is being, first of all, carried by the manager, but most importantly, it is being absorbed first by the department. So a department is a place. So you see, that halfway house must be a noun. Most times it's a department. And so the rent is first of all apportioned to the factory department or the production department. And now from the production department, it is now absorbed into the final product. So you see here, unlike variable cost that you just apportion it straight to the product, in fixed cost, you have to go through a toll gate called the department. Okay, so now, not all the halfway houses could be the same for all overheads. There are different bases of apportionment that we can use in holding these fixed costs before they are sent to the final product. We call those halfway house. We call them we use an appropriate base to apportion them. Below here is some overheads that we would like to consider. And let us look at the appropriate basis of apportionment for these overheads. First of all, we have factory rent. Factory rent has to do with the floor space, the rent of a factory. What is the appropriate basis of measurement? Is the floor space. So what you do is that you measure the factory rent, measure the factory space as a floor square meter. You compare it with the total building space. So you will know how you apportion your factory rent in, like, let me say, you are paying rent for the whole building, let's say it's 1 million. And where the production house is being, the engine house is taking 70% of the whole space. It then means that the factory rent, 70% will go to the production. So that is what it means here. Now look at factory lighting. Factory lighting, the appropriate basis of apportionment is the number of lighting facility. Then we look at heating, we look at depreciation, we look at insurance. Now, one thing you should know about these units of appropriate basis of apportionment, it could be anything. It is not compulsory that factory rent must use floor space. It is a measure of your judgment and common sense. So it means that in the exam hall, Chiamaka might decide to say that factory lighting, we want to use number of watts. Madam Ramatu might decide to say factory lighting, we will use number of lighting facility. So it's all depends on your judgment. Nobody will mark you wrong because you have exercised your judgment. It is how you now carry out your calculation that matters. All right. Now, in a manufacturing process, we usually find what they call a production department, and we have a service department. Now, what is a production department? Production department is that department that is involved in the actual work of production. They are in the front line of making the product that is the final product for consumption. Okay, now let's take an example of a bakery. A bakery might have the milling and mixing department. So the mixing and milling department might be in one side section where they pour all the raw materials together and they start mixing them either with a machine. And when they finish mixing, they start kneading them. That is the production and mixing and milling department. And so after mixing and milling it and kneading it, they will now cut it into small, small pieces and put it in a pan, leave it to rise. Then the next department could be the baking department. The baking department will take that bread, that dough, call it dough, that is already ripe. It has risen up to a level where it is being put into the oven. So they throw it into the oven. After a number of calculated minutes or hours, they bring the bread out or they harvest it and leave it to dry. Now, when that is done, another department, slicing department, will take effect. They will take this bread, put it in the machine, and the machine will slice it and they wrap it in the final package for customers to be, for delivery to customers. And so you can see that here, these three departments from mixing and milling to baking to slicing are production departments. They're involved from changing the raw material down to the finished goods. Now, service departments, they are not involved in the production department. But sometimes, they need the services of this service department for the production department to work, to function well. Let's take, for example, maintenance of the machine. Now, this maintenance department, they do not involve in production, but sometimes a machine might break down and the maintenance department will be called in to fix the machine. And so when they fix the machine, they have provided a service to the production department. They are a service department. Another service department would be the kitchen or canteen. So somebody must eat, isn't it? So when you're tired, when you're hungry, you go and eat. And so the service department, the kitchen or canteen, has provided service to the production department. So now, how do we apportion costs to the product when we have a production department and a service department? One thing you should know is that the production departments are directly involved in the production of the products. And so it is their cost that matters. But what about the service department? They are not directly involved in production, but they render useful service to the production department. So the service departments are indirectly absorbed into the product. So we do what they call a three-step apportionment and absorption. First, we apportion all the overhead costs to all the departments, both production and service departments, using the appropriate basis of apportionment. So what we do is that anything that belongs to the production department, you take it straight to that production department. If it belongs to the service department, take it straight to the service department. If there's a way you can prorate the sharing between the production and the service, you do that. Now, when that first stage is done, both production and service department will have cost allocated to them. The next stage, the second thing, is to reapportion the service department to the production department. So you see now that we want to remove the costs that we have incurred in the service department, because service departments are not directly involved in production. And so there will be a means of removing the costs from the service department, channel them to the production department. Then the third thing is from the production department, which I call the halfway house, we can now absorb it to the product. We can now absorb it from the production department to the product. So you see where the name comes out, production, absorption. So I call these things the 3 A's. First of all is allocate costs to whichever department that is incurring the costs. Then the second one is apportion. Those ones that you cannot allocate directly, you apportion them. Now, when you apportion, you can also do a reapportionment. We are doing reapportionment of the service department cost into the production. And the third A is absorption, which is the final, because the final products are going to absorb it from the department. Now, the final product will only absorb it from the department using what we call the overhead absorption rate, also known as OAR. Give me a moment. I will come back and explain what this OAR is all about. Yes, we are back. We are back. All right, so we are talking about the overhead absorption rate. Now, overhead absorption rate is only peculiar to absorption costing. So you see here, overhead absorption rate. We link it with absorption costing because the word absorption is there. So absorption costing uses overhead absorption rate, also known as OAR. Now, what is this OAR. The concept of overhead absorption rates is to find one rate that can be used as a blanket rate to charge all departments. So our aim here is to look for one rate and say, this is the rate that the industry or the company is going to use, and as a judgment for charging all the departments for absorbing the cost from these departments to the product. Now, this rate is also predetermined in advance. So it means that before a period of costs, you would have determined what that absorption rate will be. And you are going to be using that predetermined rate to multiply your level of activity. Now, how do we get this rate? It's very simple. Absorption costing uses one thing to judge its level of activity, and that is labor hours. First of all, before we talk about that, what is the formula for overhead absorption rate? It's simply the total cost, that is the total fixed costs or the total overhead costs divided by the total level of activity. Cost does not depend on the level of activity. It doesn't depend on the level of activity. So that is why we have to do it as a predetermined cost. Based on your experience, you must have gotten an average level of activity that your company would have been using as a benchmark. Now, when you get your fixed cost for that period, you divide it by that predetermined level of activity, budgeted level of activity to get your overhead absorption rate. Okay, so this level of activity here is labor hours. So when you are looking at absorption costing, you are concerned with only labor hours. That is your level of activity. So when we get our overhead absorption rate, what do? That is that rate. I usually call it a judgment rate. That is that rate you will use to judge how much a department is supposed to account for a product. So if department A uses 30 hours and you have charged your overhead absorption rate as 1 naira per hour, it means you're going to charge 30,000 naira. 1,000 naira per hour, and they have used 30 hours, they're going to charge 30,000 naira. If another department uses 50 hours, 1,000 naira per hour, they're going to charge 50,000. So that is how we use the overhead absorption rate. Okay, so this gives rise to what we call over absorption and under absorption. This concept of over absorption and under absorption, what is it? Okay, so let's see how we will explain over absorption and under absorption. Usually, I use this example. You took 10,000 naira in your hand and you went to a supermarket to buy some stuff. Now, you plan to spend 10,000 naira. You budgeted 10,000 naira to spend. And when you get to the supermarket, after picking, you went to the counter and you were told that, madam, your bill is 12,000 naira. What have you done? You have overspent. You have overpicked. You're supposed to have picked 10,000 naira worth of goods, but you have overpicked by 2,000. What do we call that? You have overabsorbed. It means you have taken more than you are supposed to have taken, and that means if you have to pay for that, it means you may want to pay more than you have budgeted for, or if you don't have money, you may want to borrow. What if you went to the counter and you were told that your bill is 9,500? Wow, you have change. You have underpicked. You're supposed to have picked 10,000 naira, but you have underpicked by 9,500. So in that case, when you don't spend more than you have budgeted, when you spend lower, it is called under absorption. So take note of those two concepts. All right, so all right, so let's look at okay, I think I mixed up the explanation. Sorry. Okay, let's look at over absorption again. You have budgeted for 10,000 naira, and you went there and you spent 9,500. The actual thing you spent on is 9,500, but your budget was 10,000. Okay, it means you have over budgeted. Yes, that's it. You have over budgeted. So over budgeting is over absorption. So when you go to the market expecting to spend 10,000 naira, but you went there and you see that the bill is 12,000 naira, you tell yourself what you budgeted for was lower than what you see in the market. That means you have under budgeted, under absorbed. Okay, sometimes the high cost of living, the currency exchange may make you under absorb. You may be thinking that this thing is costing you this amount, and you go to the market, you find out that it is more than that, and so you have under planned, under absorbed. Look at the example I gave here. For example, suppose I plan to give 1,000 naira for dinner to each student that joined this class today. And I was supposed to have 4 students here. I was supposed to have 4 students. And that means I have planned 4,000 naira to give all the students. But I'm seeing 2 students now. So the actual money I'm supposed to spend now is 2,000. That means I brought 4,000, but I'm spending 2,000. That means the excess with me is an over absorption. Now, assuming I have planned to spend money for 4,000 naira for 4 students, and lo and behold, I get 10 students joining. Wow, that means the extra 6,000 naira I'm going to spend on those 2 people, where will I get them? It means I have under budgeted. I have under absorbed. Okay, so I believe that the explanation is clear. Now let's go to our first exercise for today, exercise 1.1. Let me read this question. For those of you who have printed your material, you can use it and maybe mark on it and do the necessary adjustment. For those who have not printed, well, we'll be looking at the digital copy here, and you can later print and use a digital copy as a form of revision. Now the question is this: the BRT company is preparing its production overhead budgets and determining the apportionment of those overheads to products. Cost centers. Yes, that was the word I was looking for. Cost centers. These are those halfway house. They are called cost centers. Yes. Cost centers, that's the name I was looking for. Cost centers, expenses, and related information have been budgeted. Now, if you look at this table here, look at the expenses ranging from direct, indirect wages down to heat and lighting. Heat and lighting here, that is where the expense ends. Heat and lighting, that is where the expense ends. Okay, depreciation. Yes, depreciation is also an expense. That is where it ends. Now, from value of machine is not an expense. That is how much it is valued. You can see that for all these other ones, from value of machine to area, square feet, they are appropriate basis for measurement. Then you can see the cost centers. Here we have machine A, machine shop A, it's a cost center. Machine cost B, it's a cost center, which is a department. Assembly is a cost center. Canteen and maintenance. Now, can you show me which is the production department and which is the service department? Of course, machine shop A, machine shop B, and assembly are all production departments, while the canteen and maintenance are the service departments. Okay, so these are your cost centers. Now, looking at this table, which we'll visit again, the requirement here says using the direct apportionment to production department method. What does that mean? Direct apportionment. I told you that there are 3 A's. First of all, you do a direct apportionment. Secondly, you do allocation. Those ones you cannot directly apportion, you allocate using the appropriate, okay, you apportion, sorry, using, sorry, there is direct apportionment, then there is allocation, using the basis of apportionment to do that. Then the next one is absorption. You are going to see all of them now. It says here, using the direct apportionment to production department method and basis of apportionment which you consider most appropriate from the information provided. Calculate what? So this is what they want you to do. Calculate the total overhead for the 3 production departments. Now you can see 5 departments here. You need to know which of these are the production departments. I've identified them for you: machine A, machine B, and assembly. But what will you do about the canteen and maintenance? Anything you have apportioned to them, you have to reapportion them to the 3 production departments. That means you are answering the question well. So let's answer that A part of the question. So this is supposed to be page 5. Let me go here and get to page 5. Let's go to page 5. Just a moment. All right, so this is our question here, page 5. Sorry, just a moment. Just a moment, please. I'm having difficulties here. Give me a moment. Let me open the document again. Okay, so let me share my screen once again. Perfect. So now this is my question here. Now let's get to the solution. Now we are told to calculate the overhead for the 3 production departments. So what do? I believe we all have our calculator with us. Let me get my own calculator here. Okay. All right, so what do? Looking at the question here, this total column is the total of what we have in machine A plus what we have in machine B plus what we have in assembly, canteen, and maintenance. So these 5 departments, their cost here gives you this total indirect wages of 78,560. So what do you do with indirect wages? So you take them one after the other. Indirect wages have been allocated. So what do? We copy and paste it the same way. So if you look at it, indirect wages here, basis of apportionment is direct allocation. Direct allocation. Direct allocation. So we leave it the way it is. It has been directly allocated. The next one here is your consumable materials. Your consumable materials here has been directly allocated. There is nowhere consumable materials can be allocated to maintenance. So maintenance does not have it. So everything here has been allocated. It's direct allocation. That's fine. Maintenance has 0. The next one here is rent and rates. Now, what we notice here is we have just one figure in the total column, but we don't have anything in machine A down to maintenance. So there is a need for us to put figures in machine A, machine B, assembly, canteen, and maintenance, using what we call our appropriate basis of measurement. So which is the appropriate basis for measurement? What Madam Ramatu can use may be different from what Chiamaka may use. So may also be different from what Chimaroke will use. So Chimaroke decides to use area or square feet. So that is what I decide to use, area square feet. So what do? This is the 16,700, which is the total cost here. How do we spread this cost down to all of these? So look at what we'll do. Let's try that of machine A. For machine A, the total area for machine shop A is 10,000 naira. So you say 10,000 naira, which is the area, okay, 10,000, not naira, 10,000 square area divided by the total area of 45,000. So you say 10,000 divided by 45,000 multiplied by this cost of 16,700. So multiply by 16,700, and that will give me 3711. 3711 from our calculation. That is this. Let's try machine B. For machine B, you are going to use 12,000 square feet. So you say 12,000 now divided by 45,000, divided by 45,000 multiplied by 16,700, multiplied by 16,700. That gives me 4453. 4453. That's correct. So that is how you do for assembly, you do for canteen, you do for maintenance. And when you do it correctly, you'll be getting these correct figures that we have here. So that is how we do for rent and rates. The next thing to do is you take buildings insurance. Of course, buildings are all in square feet area. So once again, I will use area square feet. So I decide to use area square feet as my basis of measurement. And I would do the same thing I did. I will come for shop A, machine shop A. I will say 10,000 divided by 45,000 multiplied by 2,400. And that gives me 533. That gives me 533. That is how you do for shop B, machine shop, yeah, and assembly, canteen, and maintenance. That is how you do, and you get these figures that we got here. We now go to power, and we have a charge of 8,600 naira. What is our unit? What is our basis of apportionment? Of course, you see where they wrote power usage. So we use it immediately that way. And this is in percentage. And we have 100% here. It means machine A takes 55% of it. Machine B takes 40%. Assembly takes 3%. Canteen takes 0. So you will not allocate anything to canteen. And maintenance takes 2%. So if you have to add 55 plus 40, that gives you 95. Then if you add 3 plus 2, which is 5, it gives you 100. So how do you get your power for machine A? You will simply say 55 divided by 100 multiplied by 8,600. And that gives me 4,730. 4,730, which is what we have here. So that's how you apportion it for all the other ones that has value in it. Canteen has 0. We go to the next one, which is heat and lighting. Heat and lighting. Once again, I will use power usage. Power usage for heat and lighting. And I will once again say for machine A is 55% divided by 100 multiplied by 3,400, and it gives me 1,870. That is how we got this figure. Then the next thing here is depreciation machinery. I will simply use value of machine as my basis of apportionment. So for machine A, I'll simply say 201,000 divided by 402,000 multiplied by 40,200, and that gives me 20,100. That is how I got my 20,100. So if you see, Depreciation, this is where your expenditure ends. All these things after depreciation are not expenditures, they are basis of apportionment. So you've calculated all your expenditure from indirect material to depreciation. So what do? You look for the subtotal. Normally you would have called it total, but you call it subtotal. Why? I will tell you. All right, so you add the total overhead and you have what we call 166,760. You add for machine A, machine B, and all of that, you got the appropriate figure. That's fine. What do you do next? The next thing is to reallocate this canteen and maintenance. You reallocate them. You don't want anything to be in canteen and maintenance. So you're absorbing them in the production department. So how do we do it? Now, first of all, we look at which one do you allocate first among the two, canteen and maintenance. Of course, canteen, because those in the maintenance department will want to eat from the canteen. So canteen serves everybody. So canteen is the one to be first reallocated. So what do we do here? Look at your canteen figure of 32,797. It is in positive here. You bring it under and put a bracket, meaning negative. Why? Because this plus this, so this positive figure plus a negative figure, the same amount, gives you 0. So that way, you have nailed this one off to 0. Now, it is this cost you are sharing. You are sharing this cost to all these other departments. So how do you share it? This is what you do. You come back again and add the cost of machine A plus the cost of machine B plus the cost of assembly, you jump canteen, plus the cost of maintenance. This 4 will not be able to give you this 166 because this 166,760 includes this canteen. If you want to know the cost excluding canteen, you simply say 166,760 minus 32,797. What you have is 133,963. That is the addition of machine A, machine B, assembly, and maintenance. So what you simply do is, for you to get the cost of machine A, you simply say 45,930 divided by 133,963. 45,930 divided by 133,963 multiplied by 32,997, which is what you want to reallocate. It will give you 11,245. So you see here that by the time you do it that way, for machine B, machine, and assembly, you find out that when you add this figure for machine A plus this figure for machine B plus this figure for assembly plus this figure for maintenance, when you add this 4, it must give you this figure for canteen. So it means that canteen has gone off and it has shared that money to all the other departments. So when you recalculate again, your machine A has increased from 45,000 to 57,000. Machine B has increased slightly. Assembly has increased. Now, canteen has gone to 0. And maintenance has increased from 16,000 to 20,000. But your total department remains the same because the cost has been incurred in total terms. But you have just changed batting. You have changed the canteen department. They have removed it and they have taken it to other departments. After that, you will not do the same thing for the maintenance. Maintenance has to go. So this is a positive figure, 20,600. You remove it by making it a negative here. And the same way you do it, what you did for canteen, you do for maintenance. So what you do now, you recalculate the whole total again. You have 57,175 plus all that. The shortcut is to do 166,760 minus that of maintenance, which is 2,600. You will have 146,160. 146,160. That is the addition of this machine A, machine B, 146,160. So what do? 57,175 divided by 146,160 multiplied by 20,600, you have 8,058. So when you do that, that is how you do for machine B, assembly, and by the time you recompute again, your maintenance is 0, canteen is 0, so there is no service department cost. Your assembly cost has increased slightly. Your machine cost has increased. Your two machine costs have increased. And your total figure is still the same. Now, can you see now that this total, which you had from here, going to the final figure, it is still the same. And the thing you can see now is only 3 cost centers are bearing the total cost, which are the production department, machine A, machine B, and assembly. Canteen and serve and maintenance are no longer bearing anything. So that is the first thing that question is asking us to do. So that is what the first requirement of this question says. Using the direct apportionment to production department, consider most appropriate from the information, calculates your overhead totals for the 3 production departments. So for the 3 production departments, you have just done justice to it. Okay, so now let's look at the B part of the question. They said now, determine the budgeted overhead absorption rates for each of the production. Now, that is the important thing here in absorption costing, to get your overhead absorption rates. How do we do that? Okay, so here is our solution for the B part. You see here that overhead absorption rate is total estimated overhead cost divided by total budgeted level of activity. And we know that our total overhead cost is this 166,760 here. That's fine. What is our budgeted level of activity? It is labor hours. I told you before that absorption costing, you only use labor hours. And so where can we find the labor hours? If you look at it here, direct labor hours, we are told is 35,000 hours. Everything is 35,000 hours. So what do? We simply say 166,760 divided by 35,000 hours. And what we have here is 4 naira 76 kobo per direct labor hours. So this 4 naira 76 kobo is your overhead absorption rate. This is the rate you will use to measure how much each department is going to pay by way of overheads based on the labor hours. Let's go to the C part. The C part says the total production overhead expenditure of the company was 176,533. So you see, This is the actual expenditure. Okay, that is the overhead. And this actual activities was as follows. Now you look at the actual activities. The one we did before was budgeted. Now this is actual. Direct labor hours, 8,200, 6,500, 21,000. If we have to add them together, let's see, we have to add them together, 8,200 plus 6,500 plus 21,900. That gives me 36,600. Then we look at machine hours. Now we are asked to calculate the under or over absorption of the overheads. Remember what I told you about under and over absorption. What you budgeted and took to the market is different from how much you are paying actually. Now, if what you budgeted and took to the market is higher than what you actually spent, it means you have over budgeted, over absorbed. Now, if what you actually spent is higher than what you took to the market, it means you under budget or under absorb. Let's use that mentality to solve the C part of the question. Now we have gotten from the C part, from the B part, we have our overhead absorption rate of 4 naira 76 kobo. So you bring that for all the departments. That is the rate we use in judging all the departments. How many direct labor hours was incurred in Department A? We have here 8,265 for B and 21,900. These are the things you put down here. So when you multiply it here, your expected cost based on actual direct labor hours, not on budgeted labor hours. Because if you go here and start using 8,000, 6,200, 20,800. This is budgeted level of activity. Now you are using actual level of activity. By the time I will be teaching you variance analysis, you will understand why we are using actual level of activity. Okay, so when you multiply, this is your expected cost for machine A, that for B, and this for C. When you add them up together, you have 174,216. It means this is the figure that you had in your pocket after doing your calculations. This is what you took to the supermarket or to the market to buy goods, so to speak. And now the question says this was what you actually spent, 176,533. It means you spent more than what you have in your pocket. The difference is an under absorption. It means that you did not budget enough to cover the actual things you spent. Okay, so that is so far for our absorption costing. So that's so far for it. So the next thing we want to look at now is the second method called the activity-based costing. Now, the activity-based costing, I told you before, is a modern method of costing. Now, absorption costing had some imperfections. It relies on common sense and judgment to allocate overheads using the basis of apportionment, which is arbitrary, which is not universally accepted. You use your judgment. It is sometimes not reliable. But the more reliable method is the activity-based costing. Now, what is the similarity between the absorption costing and the activity-based costing? First, the similarity lies in how you treat variable costs. The way you treat variable costs in absorption costing is the same method you treat variable costs in activity-based costing. Look at those direct materials, look at those direct labor, just directly allocate them to the final product. Case closed. But now the difference lies in how we allocate fixed costs. How we allocate fixed costs. So if you notice here that in diagram 1.4, we are having the same halfway house we had when we did absorption costing. Okay, we have the same halfway house, which I call cost centers in absorption costing. Now, in activity-based costing, you don't call it cost centers. You call them cost drivers. Cost drivers. They are verbs, action words, activity words. They denote activity. That is why it is called activity-based costing. Now, one other thing that is different between absorption costing and activity-based costing is the measure of that judgment cost. I call it judgment cost when we are dealing with absorption costing because that is what you use to judge all your departments. In absorption costing, that judgment cost is overhead absorption rate, OAR. In activity-based costing, that judgment cost is called your cost driver rate, CDR. What is CDR? CDR is total cost for each cost pool, divided by the budgeted level of activity of each cost driver. Now, if you look at this formula, it is the same thing we use in absorption costing. Total costs all over total level of activity. The difference here is in cost driver rate, they're not taking the total cost. They're just taking the total cost for each cost pool and the total level of activity for each cost driver. So if there are 5 cost pools, you have to find 5 cost driver rates. But in absorption costing, you just find 1 overhead absorption rate. And so that lies the difference. So look at some important points to note in absorption costing and activity-based costing. Absorption costing method, overheads are incurred by nouns, cost centers, manager, most especially department. In ABC, they are driven by verbs, cost pool, cost drivers. Absorption costing has one OAR, which is based on labor hours. ABC has several cost driver rates, which is determined by the number of cost drivers, cost pools available. Now let us look at the ABC method and contrast it with the absorption costing method. Give me a moment, I'll get right back to you. Okay, let's look at this Danfo company. Makes and sells 2 products, X and Y, and we have the data for production and sales. So you now see X and Y, we have 4,000 is the sales demand for X, 8,000 is the sales demand for Y. And look at the direct material costs. Then we have the direct labor hours. Direct labor hours, not labor costs, which is 0.1 hours per unit, 0.2 hours per unit. And now this is direct labor cost per unit, 2 naira. Okay, so direct labor cost per unit, 2 naira. Now, production overhead, we are told that it is 500,000 for each month. So it is called a period cost. So this 500,000 for each month is the same as this 500,000 here. And look at how the breakdown is done. So all this batch setup, order handling, machining, quality control, these are your cost pool. Your cost pool. Now look at the cost drivers, things that drives the cost. We have for batch setup, we have the number of setups. Now it means that there are total of 20 setups that will be made. 20 setups. Product X will take 10, product Y will take 10. For number of orders, the total number of hours is 40, 24 relates to product X, 16 relates to product Y, and all that. Now we are told to calculate the full production costs for products X and Y using the traditional absorption costing. So once again, we are doing absorption costing. And now they said something here, absorption costing overhead on direct labor hour basis. So just know that direct labor hour is, excuse me, direct labor hours is what you use for absorption costing. So let's look at the solution. All right, so the solution here, this is the solution, the workings. So we have sales demand of 4,000 and 8,000 is all written down here in units. Now, direct material and 10 naira as given to us 4,000, you have 80,000. So that is your total material cost. The total material cost is 80,000 for X, for Y is 80,000. When you add them together, you're having 160,000 material cost. Now, direct labor costs per unit. Direct labor costs per unit, 2 naira and 4 naira. That's what we have here. So when you multiply 2 naira per unit by 4,000 units, you have your 8,000 naira cost of labor. When you multiply 4 naira per unit with 8,000 units, you have 32,000 naira for the whole of product Y. When you add 32,000 to 8,000, you have total of labor cost as 40,000. So you add your material costs and your labor cost together. I told you to give you what they call the prime cost. The prime cost. So your prime cost here is this 80,000 plus 8,000, which is 88,000. Here it is 80,000 plus 32,000 gives you 112,000. When you add them together, you have 200, which is the same thing as adding 160 here plus 40 here gives you 200. So the same thing, whether you go from top to bottom or from left to right, you're having the same 200,000. Sorry, let me plug my charger for my laptop before it goes off. Better. All right. So now that you have your prime costs, you now have to do your overheads. And I'll use working here, line fixed overhead divided by hours. So sorry, the network threw me off. I'm back now. Okay, let me share my screen. Thank you. Now, we have our total overhead cost, which is 500. It should be divided by your total level of activity. Total level of activity is supposed to be your total labor hours. But we are not given total labor hours. How do we find it? So this is what we do here. This is your total level of total cost 500,000. Total level of activity, which is the labor hours. How do we do it? 0.1 hours is used for 1 unit. If you spend 0.1 hours making 1 unit, how many hours will you spend making 4,000 units? It's simple. 0.1 multiplied by 4,000. So 0.1 multiplied by 4,000 should give me 400. So first of all here, I have my 0.1 multiplied by 400 here. This is showing working here. Then, if you use 0.2 hours to make 1 product Y, and you have 8,000 units of product Y, so you're going to say 0.2 multiplied by 8,000, that will give me 1,600. So 0.2 multiplied by 8,000 gives me 1,600. Remember, 0.1 times 4,000 gives me 400. 0.2 times 800 gives me 1,006. So I'll add my 400 to my 1,006. I have 2,000. So it simply means 500,000 divided by 2,000. So I will say 500,000 divided by 2,000, that gives me 250. That means 250 naira per direct labor hours is my overhead absorption rate. So this is my judgment cost. It means that I'm going to use 250 naira to multiply the number of labor hours each department has. So going to product X department, I will say 250 naira multiplied by the number of labor hours. Remember, this 0.1 times 400,000 is the same thing I have here. So this already is 400. So 400 multiplied by 250 naira gives me 100,000. And that is the 100,000 I have here. Going to product Y, my judgment cost is 250 multiplied by 1,600. That gives me the 400,000 I have here. It is instructive to note that when you add 100 plus 400, it should give you your 500, which is the total overhead expenses that you had at the beginning. So it means your 200 prime cost plus 500 indirect cost or period cost gives me 700,000 naira full cost, which is subdivided into product X 188,000. How do we get 188,000? Is this 88 plus 100 gives me 188. Now, how do we get 5112 here? It is this 112 plus 400. So when you add this 118 plus 512, it must give you 700. Now that means you have done your calculation well. But in an exam, don't worry about if your calculation is right or wrong. Just follow the steps. Whether you put a wrong answer or not, you are going to get a big mark for following the steps correctly. You might just only lose half mark for bringing a wrong answer. But when you bring a wrong answer, but you are following it up, it's only once you'll be penalized for that wrong answer. But anything you get as a result of that wrong answer, if you are getting the steps where you are getting all the mark. Now we've done the overhead absorption rate. We've done the absorption costing method. So can you see it is so simple? As a summary, we did the prime costs by getting the total direct material cost from the unit material cost. We now got the total labor cost from the unit labor cost. We add the total material cost to the total labor cost. We got a prime cost. Then we did the overheads by workings. I always suggest that you do your overheads by workings and just put the line pick answer here. So your final answer looks very neat. But you do the bulk of the math, the work in your workings, so you can afford to make mistake and cross the mistake and do it again. But this is where your answers are. So this is what they are marking you, but on the strength of your workings. Let's look at the B part of the question. They said using activity-based costing. Now let's apply activity-based costing to our solution. Now, if you look at it, it's so straightforward here. All right. How do I manage to give a straightforward answer? Once again, my sales demand is 4,000 and 8,000 for product X and Y respectively. Now, did you see the step I jumped? Look at the B part. And I said prime cost, C part A above. It is this same prime cost. I now copy and paste, which you can find here. I have copied and pasted them. Now, why did I do this? I told you that the similarity between overhead absorption costing with activity-based costing is the way they treat prime costs or variable costs. They treat it the same. So if you have done that of overhead of absorption costing, no need starting to do the same thing in ABC. It's going to waste your time. ABC have more things to do than you to waste your time doing all that. So just bring the prime cost and just put that it's the same prime cost you had in A that you are bringing here in B. You are getting the full mark. Now, your workings for overhead, I told you overhead, just do workings. On the strength of your working, you put your final figure here. So let's look at those workings. And I told you here that as many overhead cost drivers, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We are going to calculate 4 cost driver rates. So what do we have here? Batch setup. The total cost here is 100,000. The total level of activity for that cost pool is 20. So you say 100,000 divided by 20. That gives you 5,000. And that is exactly what we did here. That is exactly what we did here. 100,000 divided by 20 gives me 5,000. Now let me do the second one. 200,000 divided by 40 should still give me 5,000. The next one would be 120,000 divided by 15,000. What did that give us? 8 naira. And the next one, 80,000 divided by 32 will give me 2,500. And this is a calculation of my cost driver rate. You can do this first. I started to do it last in my workings. You can do it first in your workings. After getting this, you will now do this table. Now, what is this table all about? We have batch setup as an activity. So you are bringing these things down again. Look at the cost drivers. Those cost drivers you have there, this is what you have here. Now look at your cost driver rates, which are these rates you have here. Bring them here. Now, what is the total cost? 100. That is the total cost here, 100. Total cost here is 200, like that, like that, like that. That is what you do here. Gives you 500. Now the trick is, how do you apportion them into product X and product Y? What do you do? Look at this judgment cost for this activity. It's 5,000. That's the judgment cost. So you simply say 5,000 multiplied by 10 for product X. That will give me 50,000. And you say 5,000 here multiplied by 10. That will also give me 50,000. Then you go to the next one. The judgment cost here is 5,000. And we say number of orders. So it's going to be 5,000 multiplied by 24 gives me 120,000. Then 5,000 multiplied by 16, that should give me 80,000. So it is instructive to know that when you add this to this, you should be able to get this. If you don't get this, then there's something wrong. Then here is our judgment cost here of 8 naira. So you say 8 naira multiplied by 6,000. That would give me 48,000. You go again, 8 naira multiplied by 9,000. You go here, that's 72. Then the last one here is the quality control, 2,500. So you say 2,500 multiplied by 18. Then the other one is 2,500 multiplied by 14. You are getting this figure and this figure respectively. Always test them by adding them together, for it will give you this total cost. So you see, this total cost is still giving you 500 like we have in absorption costing, and giving you 700 like we had in absorption costing. But that the difference here is when you add product X, you are getting this figure which you are writing here, and product Y, doing it, you are getting a different figure here. And when you add the two of, you add prime cost plus overhead, you're having 351, you're having 249. Now, can you see the comparison now between these two? let's compare. Okay, sorry, let me get you the absorption costing answer. Good. Now look at product X. In ABC, you are telling me it is 351,000. But in absorption costing, you are saying it's 188. Then in absorption costing, product Y is 512, and here it is 349. So you see the way each of them is being integrated, the cost is being integrated to the product varies for each method. But one thing is clear, the total cost in absorption costing is 700, and that of ABC is still 700. But how this 700 is being divided into the products depends on the method, which is ABC or absorption. So which one of them is correct? We said ABC is correct because it is they use the more sophisticated activities to drive the cost. You know, activities, if there are no activities, you will not incur costs. For example, look at the act of teaching. I am teaching here. If there is no teaching, you guys will not pay the amount you are paying. So there will be no cost incurred. So it is the cost of teaching that I have incurred and passed to you, and you are paying. So activity of teaching is what drives the costs. That is activity-based costing. But absorption costing, the fact that I am a teacher means I will absorb costs. Or the fact that this is PM department, that is why we're absorbing this cost. That is what absorption costing is saying. So the fact that a manager is there or a department is standing is not an appropriate measure of the cost. The use of direct labor hours is also arbitrary. But you see, when you are using the ABC costing, which is more accurate, more scientific in nature, you're going to get accurate pricing or costing of your product. But you see, the funny thing is, ABC is too complicated to understand. It's too it is too costly to implement. While the absorption costing is easy to understand, easy to implement. And so in practice, most people use absorption costing. Now, let's come to the summary of what we learned today. Okay, so absorption costing is a traditional approach of dealing with overheads involving 3 stages. Allocation. By allocation, what we mean is that those ones that naturally belong to a department, you put it to that department. Okay, so let's say, for example, you are dealing with fish. We have iced fish and you have smoked fish. These are 2 departments. Then you incur ice block costs, repairs of refrigerator. Which department will bear it? It is the iced fish department. Nothing should go to the smoked fish because you don't put smoked fish in the fridge or you don't use ice block on them. That is direct allocation. When we say cost of firewood, you know it's smoked fish. I would take it. All right, so we have direct allocation. Then we have apportionment and reapportionment. Apportionment is when there is no direct allocation involved. You now use your basis of apportionment that you think is best suitable. You now use it to apportion to all departments. Then if there are service departments, you reapportion them into the production department. Then the third thing is absorption from those cost centers using the absorption overhead rate or overhead absorption rate. So you see, allocation is done directly to the affected department, like I explained. Apportionment is done using suitable basis, and absorption is done after apportionment using the overhead absorption rate. Now we talked about over absorption and under absorption. This occurs when overhead incurred does not equal to the expected absorption, expected overhead that is being absorbed. And I gave an example of, let's say you're going to the supermarket, you have XYZ amount of money, and what you picked, the cost is more than what you have in your pocket. It means you have under budgeted, that is under absorbed. But when the cost you are paying for those items is lower than what you have in your pocket, it means you have over budgeted, you have over absorbed. All right. Unlike absorption costing that uses direct labor hours or machine hours, most times it's direct labor hours to find overhead absorption rate. Activity-based costing uses cost driver rates for each cost pool to find a suitable rate to use to absorb overhead to the final product. I call these results from OA arrow and CD arrow, I call them judgment costs, because that rate is determining the cost that will be used finally to judge how much each product in each department or each department is incurring as costs. And we said ABC is a more modern approach to dealing with overheads and is more accurate than absorption costing. Both absorption costing and activity-based costing are approaches that is used in dealing with full cost of a product, and they have their advantages and disadvantages. So you see, full cost of a product comprise of variable costs and fixed costs. When you add them together, it's full cost. And I told you similarities between absorption costing and ABC. The way they handle the variable cost is the same. The way they handle the prime cost is the same. Differences is how they handle the fixed costs. And what they do here is absorption costing. You think about overhead absorption rates. You think about labor hours only. ABC, you think about CDR. Then you think about the cost pool, the number of cost pool and the cost drivers. So that is the stuff that we are going to do today. We have come to the end of our absorption costing and ABC. Our next class, we are going to be looking at absorption costing and marginal costing. That's another interesting topic we are going to learn, and we are going to see how marginal costing comes to play as the focal costs when we are doing performance management. Okay, so for those of us who joined in late, the recording of this video will be available to you, for everyone, so that you can watch again, you can fill up your knowledge. I will advise you to play the recording as soon as possible. Download it. If it means using a cheap night plan method, like I use the cheap night plan method, that's from a network that starts from 11 p.m. So from 11 p.m. I'll start downloading this same lecture. I would advise you to do the same. so that you don't spend too much on data. So I will also advise you to look at all the past questions. I've given you a link on how to download them. Look at all the past questions and see which one of them has absorption costing, ABC, and solve them. That is your assignment. Solve all the past questions, ICAN past questions relating to absorption costing and ABC. And I want you to look at that past question treated register. Anyone you've solved or you have attempted, tick it. Solved, attempted, you tick it. Now, when you do that, go back to your answer, to the answer ICAN gave, suggested solution, and compare that with your own. So there is no need submitting to me that, okay, I've done my assignment. The solution is there with you. But don't look at the solution before you solve. Solve yours, then you look at the solution. Where you see that you've made a mistake, try and see where you got it wrong. Visit the lecture again. Visit the lecture and attempt it. When you have done it twice or perhaps 3 times and you look at the lecture, you're not getting it, then come back to me on the WhatsApp. Send me a voice note. Send me an SMS. You may not really need to call me because I may be involved in another class or something. Send me a WhatsApp message explaining your situation clearly. Screenshot the part that is giving you problem and let's discuss. Or send me a voice note. I will surely respond to you. I respond more when you send me message or voice note than when you call me, because I may be in a situation where I may not give you the best of answer. But when you send me a message, I will sit down and look at it and give you your best answer. So explore all of these and you find out that you will enjoy the best of me. Thank you so much for taking the time to come to class today and to appreciate this lecture. And I will see you again on Wednesday when we'll be having absorption costing versus marginal costing. So until then, it's good night from me. Oh, I can see some charts. Let me see what is in the chat. Oh, somebody is saying thank you, thank you. I would have loved to see your faces, please. Chiamaka, please, can I see your face? Mr. Odebode, can I see your face? Madam Ramatu, I can see your face. I can see you have been paying attention. Can I see all your faces, please? Oh, that's good, Mr. Odebode. Thank you so much. Madam Favor Chiamaka, can I see your face too? Or are you in the kitchen? If you're in the kitchen, I would like to eat that food they are cooking. So I would also like you to give me a feedback on WhatsApp, how you enjoy the lecture. I'd like you to give me a feedback on how you really enjoy this lecture, whether it is good, whether it was difficult to understand, and let me get your feedback. It will help me in subsequent lecture. So thank you so much and see you again on Wednesday. Have a nice night.